The Canada government is planning to put a cap to the number of student visas issued to international students planning to study in Canada. And this is happening a few weeks after the UK government decided to stop international students coming for a master's program from bringing into the UK their dependents. Now, it's really sad to see that many of the developed countries are putting a cap to the number of student visas issued, and the reasons are so obvious. Honestly, it's not just because of the well-being of the citizens in those countries, and it's also because of the well-being of current international students and prospective international students coming to this country. In the case of Canada, the reason why they're planning on putting a cap or a restriction to the number of student visas issued is basically because of the housing problem being faced in Canada at the moment. Many international students are struggling to get accommodation. The cost of housing in the UK is on the roof. It's absolutely ridiculous at the moment in Canada when it comes to trying to get an apartment or trying to get a place to stay. Canada is trying to put a cut to the number of student visa. You want to listen to what the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure in Canada has to say about this proposed measure to put a cut or a cap to the number of student visa.
Housing has been plaguing the government, and one solution up for discussion is raising some eyebrows. That is the idea of putting a cap on the number of international students. The federal housing minister says this is one of the options the government needs to consider. Sean Fraser is the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. Hello, Minister.
Hey, it's good to be with you.
Glad to have you. Listen, you certainly attracted some attention when you raised the prospect of putting a cap on international students coming to Canada as a way of easing pressure on the housing market. You also, though, seem to suggest that maybe that was a premature conversation. A lot of people are going to be watching that conversation closely. What kind of timelines are we talking about here in terms of making that decision?
Well, look, I should be clear that the decision on managing the international student program will rest with my colleague, Minister Miller, but I think it's important that we're able to speak openly about the different challenges that communities are facing. Now, the international student program makes extraordinary economic and social contributions to Canada. It contributes tens of billions of dollars to our GDP annually. But what we've seen recently is there's been such rapid growth, given that the program is typically uncapped, that certain communities are having difficulties managing with the population growth that it's attracted. Of course, we still believe in the international student program, but we want to work with institutions in the communities where they exist to make sure it's being managed appropriately. It's not fair for the students who come to be exploited and left without adequate housing. There are some institutions, some private colleges that are not necessarily good actors, but I'm convinced have come to exist for the purpose of exploiting financially those international students who come to Canada. So we want to work with communities and work with institutions the same way we do on our permanent residency programs to make sure that we are growing the housing supply and equipping communities to deal with a growing population. That's just good governance.
Okay, you talk about how to make all of the pieces work here. One of the people that Cabinet heard from today was Professor Mike Moffat. He has argued that colleges and universities should be given funding to build student housing, and if they don't, that they should lose the ability to bring in international students. Would you go that far?
Look, there's different solutions that different people are pitching to help address this challenge, but I don't think anyone disagrees that we need to make sure that we're better aligning our housing, our healthcare, our industrial policy with our immigration policy. Professor Moffat has made the suggestion, as you've indicated. Others have called for a cap. Others still have argued that we should work with institutions to ensure that they're making the necessary investments, not just in housing, but to better support students in their studies and in their integration into the community as a quasi-settlement service provider. There's a number of different options that I think it's smart for us to consider, but at this stage, as we seek to address unique challenges with rapid population growth in centres that hold post-secondary institutions, we ought to consider all of the different options before we make a decision. I think it's important that we canvass the different suggestions that are being made by people who've been studying.
Now you've listened to what the minister has to say, and I believe you now have a better understanding on the reason why the proposed measure of reducing the number of student visas issued to international students is something that they might want to put into consideration in Canada. At the moment, Canada has the third highest number of international students, which means that there are quite a lot of people who have moved into Canada on a student visa. And at the moment, Canada has accepted students from over 184 countries. So I believe the Canadian government saw that the international students is a good market for them to build the economy, boost revenue, and they decided to get into this. And from statistics, it's shown that the Canadian government has witnessed a large number of migration into the country, mostly through the student visa, and they're trying to reduce this for obvious reasons, as you heard from the minister. So we're just going to do like a breakdown so you can understand the statistics that is making them decide to make a decision. So if you're planning to move to Canada, you need to try and start the process as soon as possible, because this has not been passed into law. This is still a measure that is still being proposed. Now, looking at other things, other options or other ways to help with the housing crisis in Canada. However, putting a cut or a cap to student visa is one of those things on the table. Now, from statistics, it shows that there are currently 807,750 international students across all study levels who have student permits in Canada. So of the 807,750 study permit holders, 551,405 received a study permit in 2022 in Canada. So it means about 500,000 student visa was issued to international students in Canada just in 2022. Now, from 2000 until 2021, the number of study permit holders has significantly increased by more than 400%, which is a lot. We're talking about the increase in the number of student visa issued in the last year into the United Kingdom. Now, reading about that of Canada, it's really on the high side, which I'm not surprised why Canada happens to be the third highest country accommodating international students. Now, from 2005 to 2015, the number of study permit holders in Canada increased by 106%. That's from 170,440 to 352,330. Now, in Canada, in 2019, Canada has issued 638,280 study visa for international students, and this happens to be the highest in the number in the last 2 decades. This is to tell you that a lot of people are moving into Canada for the study, through the study visa, and at the moment the country is currently experiencing an housing problem, and many of the international students who are moving to Canada mostly came from the Philippines, from France, from India, from the United States, from the Republic of Korea, from Iran, and from Nigeria. So these are the top countries where international students are coming from into Canada. So it's really reasonable for Canada to make that decision, because what's the point of moving to a new country and you're struggling with getting accommodation? It's probably going to be another struggle on its own, which is one thing most people are facing at the moment. If you go on different social media platforms, you see people making different videos to share their pains on how they've been struggling with housing in Canada. So yeah, we're just waiting for the next couple of months to see what the Canadian government will pass into law and what their decision will make, if they're going to be reducing the number of student visa being issued to people who are planning to come to Canada or not. So if you're planning to move to Canada, I think enough of you procrastinating that decision. You want to start pushing out or putting your plan into motion, because very soon there might be a limitation to how much student visa will be issued for those planning to move to Canada. So if my video is resourceful, please click on the like button. If you're coming across my channel for the first time, hit the subscribe button to join the amazing growing family. And my returning subscribers, thank you guys for being here. I really do appreciate you guys. So this will be the end of this video, and I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you.